Hey guys, Jacob Howard here with FPV Unlocked, and today we're going to go through several different versions of FPV footage and show you guys how to color grade it in DaVinci Resolve. First thing I want to say is being a colorist or somebody who color grades footage for a living is actually a full-time job. I know some people who do it for TV and stuff like that, and they can spend hours on one clip. So this is not going to be the solve all, every single tiny thing that you can do on a clip. This is going to be how to get a clip looking a lot nicer than when you actually took it, or if you made a mistake when you got the footage and it doesn't look as good, here's how to fix it. So we're going to look at several different clips. We have one from the DJI FPV drone right here. We have one from a GoPro color profile. And then we have one from a GoPro color profile as well, but it's a little bit overexposed over here. And then we have one from a flat GoPro color profile. And then we have one that's way underexposed. So we're going to look at how to work with these different clips so that you guys have the best information possible you can get as you're going through your own footage and color grading it. Okay, so I have the clips in here. We're going to start with the first one, the DJI FPV drone. I'm going to click into color here on the bottom. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look through the clip. I want to see what issues do we have as we go. So you can see like right here, it's a little bit overexposed up here as we come out of these shadows because the camera is still trying to adjust between these two. So it doesn't look terrible, but it tells me that these highlights we're going to have to drop a little bit. So if we get to this point here and we come down here to number 2 and we go into highlights, HL, we can turn this down a little bit and you can see it's starting to bring a little bit more of that definition back into this area here. So then I'm going to scroll through it a little bit more. And that is looking much better. It doesn't look as overexposed. It's a tiny bit overexposed, but there's not going to be a way to solve all of it simply because we have a shadow area and a lit area. So we need to just find the difference between the two and make it look a little bit better. You can also notice this is pretty dull. I believe this was filmed in the D-Cine-like version of the DJI FPV drone. So it's already looking kind of dull, so I'm going to boost up its saturation a little bit. Once again, as you do this stuff, you want to scroll through the clip. This is a little bit different than what a lot of people color grade for because they have one stationary clip on a tripod or a gimbal or whatever and it's not moving a ton. But with FPV drones, you're flying all over the place. You have different areas to look at and you have to make sure everything looks good in the end. So I'm going to, scroll through this a little bit. And I always like making a dramatic change first. So like really bumping up the saturation. Obviously that's too much. And then just bringing it down until where it looks a little bit better. So something like that looks pretty good, 58.4. You can see these colors are coming out a little bit more. The green's popping out a little bit more. It looks better. Up here on the top right, you can always click off the color grade and see the old version. So I haven't done a whole lot, but you can see like those highlights. Here it is all blown out. And with the adjustments we made, you can actually see more of the rock definition. So next thing I'm going to look at is going to be some of my lines over here. So I'm going to go into Loom versus Sat. This is something I always like doing. I like to bring all of this down right here. And basically what this does is this area here is your darkness. So you don't want your darkness having a tint. So you don't, like for example, sometimes if I reset this and let's say I turn the temperature up. So you can see even in these black areas, it's going to be orange. So let's find a really, see like this still has an orange tint over it. But if I were to do this and cut out that color on these dark spots, you can see that's now totally black. So this is an extreme example, of course, but it makes it look a little bit better when you don't have any tint over your dark shadowy areas. So I like to do that every single clip. Then if I want to mess with specific colors, I'll look on the hue versus loom. I'm actually gonna do this on one of the other clips, but not this one because it's not needed. So as I'm looking through this, I can see everything kind of has a little bit of a shade of green. So I'm gonna come to tint here and I'm gonna bring out a little bit more of the purple because green and purple are opposites in the coloring world. So you can see if I go this way, it turns it more green. If I go this way, it turns it more purple. So I want to find a little bit of a happy ground. I'd say right about there is looking pretty good. Once again, doing this helps. See, it's got that kind of green tint everywhere. Now it's got a little bit more of that orange purplish tint. And you can't really like tell it's purple, but it just looks more like the orange tint, which is really more accurate because these are all orange, the rocks are orange and everything. So next thing I'm going to look at is my shadows. Now for this, because I filmed it in D-Cine-like, I believe, the shadows actually are very well defined. You can see a lot of the information. I can boost it up and hey, yeah, you can see everything then, but it's going to be noisy when you play it and when you export it. So it's not going to look the best, and it also doesn't really look realistic. So I'm going to leave that pretty much where it is. I might turn it up a little bit later as I mess with the contrast, but right now I'm going to leave that. So next I'm going to go into the hue versus sat. This is where I'm going to look at the different colors and see which ones I don't want super relevant in the clip. We can see here the three main colors we have are green, the orange, red, and blue, of course. And you can see the same thing here. You got this orangish red, you got green spike, and you got blue. Blue is basically always going to be present if you got the sky in it, for obvious reasons. But sometimes I will like to turn down the saturation on the blue, just because you can see it invades kind of the rest of the shots. So like, even this isn't dark, this is just shadow. So our loom versus sat thing did not take away the tint in the shadow. But if I drop the saturation a little bit, you can see that bluish tint that was there in the shadow is now gone. Like, let's go back, see, bluish tint in the shadow now, and not so much. So once again, I'm going to scroll through this, make sure I didn't like lose my sky totally. It's a little desaturated, but it's not terrible. So yeah, so we'll go with that because that takes that blue tint out of the shadow. Now I'm also going to turn up the saturation on my red colors so that they pop a little bit more. That looks pretty cool, maybe a little bit much because you can see it just a little bit too much. That looks better. I like how that looks. I'm going to go back into custom and I'm going to do a little bit of an S-curve here. S-curve usually is to bring up this top one, but since that's bringing out too much of my shadows, I'm actually going to just bring it down a tiny bit, give a little bit more definition in that highlight area. I'm going to bring up this and there. So now I have even more range between the shadow and the highlights. So as far as exposed and everything, this is looking good, but it's still looking quite dull. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to turn up our saturation a little bit more. I'm going to turn up our contrast a little bit. This is starting to look way better. You can still see the definition in the rocks, but it also has just like the really cool blacks that are on it. And it's got the reds that you can see that are popping out. And yeah, all in all, this clip is looking pretty decent. Let's see what it looked like beforehand. So that was it before, just very dull. This is it now. You can see a lot more of those oranges. Everything's sticking out a lot better. So yeah, this is kind of a difficult clip to color because it's kind of dull. There's not a lot of colors to like really bring out to life, but that's just a few things you can do to kind of help bring it out as much as you can. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next clip. So this is a GoPro Hero 7 footage that is a little bit overexposed in some areas, but then underexposed in others. So we'll get a little bit of an idea of some things we can move around to make it a little bit better. This was filmed on the standard GoPro color profile. So this already has a lot of the color grading we would normally need to do already done. So once again, first thing I'm going to do is kind of scroll through it, see where maybe our problem areas are. So yeah, like on the way down, everything's looking pretty well exposed. These bushes are pretty dark, but that's not necessarily bad. A little bit overexposed here and then a little bit underexposed here. So that's where shadows and highlights can really come in handy. So this time I'm actually going to jump on the S-curve first. I'm going to see what we can bring back in the highlights without crushing any of our blacks. So that looks way better. That was it before. This is it now. Kind of scroll through it a little bit. So that looks a lot more like just a normal cloud. Still a little overexposed, but can't do a whole ton about that in the end if it's too overexposed. So I brought up our shadows a little bit, and there we go. So that's already looking a little bit better exposed. So then I'm going to come into shadows, and I'm going to lift up our shadows. That's looking way better, way more even. Scroll through it, and you can see things are looking better already. And highlights, I'm going to bring down a little bit more. And there, now you can really see the definition in those clouds. But you can also notice the image is a little bit dull now. It's a little bit like muted. So we're going to come in here. We're going to do a little bit of a color boost, just a little bit. You go about 12. And then we're actually going to turn the temperature down a little bit because it's a little bit orange. So going down, we'll make it a little bit cooler. There we go. That's looking pretty good. You can see my whites are still white. So I know I got my temperature right. And yeah, this is already looking way better. Now, what I do want to do is I want to come in here, since we got a lot of these dark areas, I want to come into loom versus sat. And you can see, look at this, color everywhere. So this was a very good example of how these shadows can be tinted. Because it's so well exposed, but badly exposed at the same time, it's kind of difficult. Like, it's a little bit overexposed over here, but it's well exposed here, and then it's a little bit dark over here. It kind of spread that color everywhere, and so then we got tinting in these shadow areas. But now that we did this, that's going to be gone. There you go. There's the old version. on the new version. So already looking way better. You can see a lot more. See, like down here, that's all blacked out. And now you can actually see some of the definition. You don't want to, like I said earlier, you could just flat out just bring this all the way up, but it's going to create a lot of noise and kind of actually be confusing to look at because it doesn't look real. It doesn't look like it's supposed to. So we're just going to do it to about there. Okay, next I'm going to come to hue versus sat again, and you can see our orange is way up here and our blue is way up here. So I'm going to come into here. I'm going to see what messing with our blue is going to do. You can see it obviously takes away the sky, but it is also taking away tinting in the actual coloring area, which I can't really see a whole lot of that. So I think it's mostly the sky that's blue. It's not really tinting everything else like our last clip. So I'm actually going to turn up the saturation a little bit on the blue because I like the color of it. That's a very nice sky. For the red, I don't really need to turn up the saturation because it's already way up here. But like you can see if I do, it really brings it out, but it's just too much. So I might actually just bring it down a little bit. And then I'm going to come over here to hue versus lume. And this is going to control how bright a color is. So like the blue up here is fairly bright. So I can turn it down and make it darker, or I can make it brighter. So that's not really going to help me in this case. But another thing I might want to look at is the reds. So I can basically change like how bright those colors are. And I do this occasionally, especially like in fall or kind of like snowy shots a little bit, like this snow right here. You can see if I bring this up, you can see it makes it a little bit brighter and contrasts a little bit better with snow and stuff like that in the shadows. I'm going to turn this up just a little bit and then go back through here and take a look at the whole video. So it's looking pretty good. I don't want to overdo it with bringing the blacks out. You can still see this is pretty dark, but all in all, I think it's looking pretty good as it is. So this was before, this is after, before, after. So obviously a huge improvement, looks a lot better than what it did. Okay, next clip. So this is a scene where this is perfectly exposed, but this is not. So this is a little bit overexposed. So we're going to, first thing we're going to do is go into highlights, and we're just going to turn them down until that overexposed area looks a little bit better. And then we'll work with the other tools we have until it all looks like it blends together instead of like, oh, you just turn the highlights down. So I'm actually just going to turn them all the way down. And this is a good clip because it has tons of colors to work with. So, but one thing I can notice right away is these rocks. They look blue. They look very, very blue. So if I even click on it here with my eyedropper tool, you can see it selected right at the heart of blue. So I'm going to want to turn this, oops, I'm on the wrong one. I'm going to go into hue versus sat. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to actually turn this down. So you can see already that looks way more like a rock color. That's it before, after. That looks much more like a rock. I'm going to go into temperature here, and I'm going to bring it down. Obviously, that's a lot of blue. That's a lot of orange. So I'm just going to kind of slide it around until it looks a little bit better. I'm going to basically look for a white area and try to make that as white as possible, which I think is right about there. So I'm going to scrub through this clip. The water obviously is supposed to be white. So let's see. Does that look white? It does to me. So we're good there. I'm going to come into here, lume versus sat. I kind of figured there wouldn't be a whole lot of issues here, but we're still going to turn it down so that there's none of that in there. Hue versus hue. This is something I do like doing for like fall shots because like some of this green, like we may want it to look all orange. So what I can do is I can come in here, select these, and I can change the color of that hue. So this is where you have to be very careful. You don't want to overdo it. Like obviously that doesn't look good, and that doesn't look good, or that doesn't look good. Ooh, that actually looks good. But I'm going to just move it over here a little bit and just make it a little bit oranger. Like it doesn't need to be insane, just a little bit, add a little bit more color in there. Okay, so once again, before, after, you can see a little bit more of the orange here in the tips of the leaves. So that looks good. I can do the same thing over here if I wanted, kind of change it around, make it more red, whatever. I kind of like where it is, so I'm going to leave that there. So one thing that's kind of bugging me is how muted everything is. So there's not like a lot of contrast between these two. So I'm going to come into here into custom, look at making an S-curve again. Obviously that's an extreme contrast, but I kind of want it to stick out a little bit more. There. Now another thing I'm going to do is go over here. I'm going to turn up our contrast a little bit, bring a little bit more life into the shadows of the shadowy area. So that's looking pretty good. I like the colors. I like how exposed this is. It's still a little bit too exposed, but nothing I can do about it now. Since it's already filmed and we already turned down our highlights. I mean, I could make it more dramatic, but it's not going to look good. So if I back up here, I'm going to pause right about here. I'm going to mess with our saturation a little bit. Obviously too much, but I like bringing it up and then messing with it as I come down. I like right about there. Something I'm seeing is the greens, like these kinds of greens and stuff, are just way too saturated. So I'm going to go into hue versus sat, and I'm actually just going to select this whole green area and just turn it down a little. So as I come back through here, I haven't turned all the green like totally down to where it doesn't look good, but I turned it down enough to where it looks better. So I'm seeing a lot of yellows, so that's something I'm going to look at here, is where are these yellows coming from? Because if we go back, these are more greens and oranges, and now they got a very like yellow look to them, which looks a little too fall than I want. So first thing I'm going to look at is probably here is where it changed, and you can see that's absolutely where it changed. So that's where it's important to scroll through your footage as you're changing colors or things like that, because it's going to change everything in that scene, not just the one scene you're looking at. So I don't really like that look. It just looks too dead. So I do like a little bit more of the greens, so I'm going to just bring it down to about here. So that still keeps some of it, but gives a little bit more of the yellow and orange tint that I was looking for. And yes, I'm fully aware I'm saying a little bit too often. Okay, so hue versus loom, that's something else I'm going to look at here. You can really see it in this video, how it changes the color. You know, you bring it down and it makes all that creepy looking stuff, and you bring it up and it's like everything turned into tinfoil. So I'm not going to go anything crazy there, but I want to look at the whole area and I want to see if there's any adjustments I can make, like in the green. See, that makes it a little bit brighter, that makes it a little darker. I actually kind of like that darker look because it contrasts well with everything else we're working on. So let's see how that looks throughout the video. Yeah, making that green a little bit darker makes the yellows, oranges, and such pop a little bit more. Okay, so here's the clip beforehand. Here's it after, before, after. Look at the rocks especially. Very blue, very overexposed here. Now, very rock color. Less overexposed here, even though it looks a little bit muted. But once again, there's only so much we can do. And yeah, that looks pretty good. I can, if I want, turn up my shadows here to just give this a little bit more life in this area. And it does. The difficult part of this clip is these rocks had that blue color, which didn't look right, but they don't really have any other color either. So there's not a whole lot you can bring in as far as like bringing out the colors, because the rock is a rock. Rocco's a rock, Zoe! Something I could do here is the hue versus sat a little bit more, and I could just turn up our reds and oranges a little bit so that they shine more in the video. So there we go. So there's that clip. Okay, on to the next one. So this is filmed on the flat profile on the GoPro Hero 7. This is in Perea, Utah. Awesome flying experience. So this one takes a lot of work because you have tons of colors, but you don't have a whole lot of definition. These are basically purple, but you can't tell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and bring out the color that we actually saw original. So first off, I'm going to come into our custom. Since this was filmed with a flat profile, I want to bring in back some of this definition here. I'm going to mess with this curve a little bit. There we go. I'm going to bring our highlights down also. And that's already looking better. Before or after. Temperature, like I said, I like to just mess with things and see how it looks. Even if I think it looks good, it's always good to still check it. So this was where it was normally at. Everything's looking okay, but we don't really have a good white to judge off of. So if we bring this down a little bit, we can see it adds a little bit more definition between the blue and the oranges, but I'm not going to do it a whole ton. So just like -20. So now I'm going to mess with our saturation and see how that works with everything, where it's bringing out the colors. Like, seriously, guys, if you want to figure out what your shot needs to look like, mess with the settings. You know where to return them, but mess with them. Like figure out where the differences are and where you need to work with them, because every clip is going to be different. So I like to just randomly move things around and kind of see, okay, how did that affect it? That's really going to help you guys out. So this clip is actually so evenly exposed everywhere. There's not even like color in the dark. There's not even like dark places at all. There's nothing absolutely black in this entire clip. So you can see all the color is over here. So I don't even have to worry about the loom versus sat. Hue versus hue. That's where I'm going to come in And we're going to make a few changes. I don't want to just go crazy because obviously that doesn't look good. But I'm going to just adjust that hue a little tiny bit. There, I didn't say it again. I'm also going to just bring this curve down a little bit more. And I said it again. And then I'm going to bring up the shadows. There we go. So look at these lines. This is it now. This was it before. Like, this looked pretty dull. It didn't look all that cool. But now look at it. You can actually see the difference in the lines and the colors. Look at this while we're diving it. Without this color grading, that looked pretty blah. But now this is much more like what it looked like in real life. So this is one of my favorite clips to color grade because it looks so much different as I work with it. And that's really cool. I mean, because that's what you want to do when you're color grading, is you want to bring out the life in the footage. So this looks way, way better, way cooler. I really, really love this clip. So obviously you can make more adjustments to this, but that's pretty much all I need to do here to make it look really cool and stick out those colors a lot more. You can see a lot more like that purple tint that I was talking about, whereas you couldn't really see that here, and now you can, and that looks pretty sweet. Okay, and our last clip. This is the underexposed one. I mean, look at this curve line. Remember on all these other ones, we had like all the color over here and the well exposed. This is all crushed. There's not much here. So of course, first thing I'm gonna wanna do is look at my shadows. I'm just gonna bring those all the way up. Well, now you can see the problem. This does not look good. It's blue, it's distorted, like that doesn't look good at all. Now, first thing, if you've been paying attention, you might go, oh, look at that. All our color is in the Lume versus Sat. So if we just, whoop, turn that down, it's going to help a ton. And then if we go into Hue versus Sat, you can see there's that blue again. And let's just turn that down. Oh, look, now that looks more normal, but it still looks terrible. Because now it has no color in the blue. Like, look at the sky. There's no color at all up there. It looks really bad. It kind of looks cool, but it looks terrible from the actual, like, this is good footage standard. So if I turn that back down to 0, where it was, reset this, and reset this, come into here, I'm going to adjust our curve. You can see that's bringing out the shadows a lot better. I'm going to turn up our highlights a little bit. Okay, so this still looks pretty dark, but there's a lot more definition in this rocky area that we can see. Let's just see what it looked like before. There's so much shadows here, it doesn't look good either. So, but now it actually looks decent because you can see the definition in these rocks. So you still have something to look at. So I'm going to bump this up a bit more. And we're still seeing that kind of like blue tint. So I'm going to look at our temperature. And you have to get way too extreme for it to actually look good with that. So I'm going to come into Hue versus Sat. And I'm actually just going to click on the color so I get a better representation of it. I'm just going to turn down the saturation a little. Doesn't have to be all the way because these rocks kind of are like a grayish blue. So it doesn't look terrible. That looks pretty good. So I'm bringing it up, scrolling through the footage. The sky still looks a beautiful blue. And like that's the thing, like even when you make a mistake like this where it's way underexposed, still parts of it are going to look absolutely beautiful. Like the sky, it's the best sky we've had out of all these clips. But we had to sacrifice the definition here to get it. So I'm going to bring up our shadows to about 17, 20, whatever, and just scroll through this some more. We're not getting really any blown highlights, a few there. So I'm just going to bring down the highlights a little bit. There we go. So this is already looking way better. This is what it was before. This is what it's now. So you can see way more information. I'm going to come into the Lume versus Sat still. I'm going to turn down that saturation in the blacks. I'm also going to look at Hue versus Hue. And I'm going to look at our greens, make them a little bit greener. Our orange, which is really what's controlling like the dirt and the rock color. I don't really want to change that, so that's not going to look good. I'm going to come in here and custom and just try to pump this out. Okay, so obviously we have crushed things here, like they're never coming back. But we just got to work with what we actually got. So we see a lot more of that green definition here in the rocks, so it kind of counteracts the blue. So it makes you think, okay, wow, these rocks actually are a little bit different, but it's cool. They got stuff growing on them. It looks nice. And there. So that's the clip now. This was it before. Obviously, radical difference. Looks way better now. You can see a lot more of what's going on. This is why it's super important, though, to get your camera settings right before you take off and make sure they're adjusted for every single scenario, because this is the kind of scenario you can have where you have footage that can be saved, but in the end, it still doesn't look as good as it would if we actually had exposed it correctly. We'd actually be able to see these rocks in their right colors and everything, see a lot more of that definition. So yeah, that wraps up our video on color grading a bunch of different kinds of FPV clips. Now, some of you might be going, well, I use iMovie or I use Premiere Pro or whatever, so this doesn't apply. A lot of this information is pretty universal. You can get a lot of the tools that I'm using right here, just like in all the other ones. I highly recommend using DaVinci Resolve when you're editing FPV footage. Not only is it free, this version I used right here for this tutorial is all free, so you get all these tools for free, but it's also literally used, it's been used on more movies, productions, and stuff like that for color grading than any other consumer video editor out there. So I highly recommend it. There'll be a link in the description down below to download it. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about this, definitely let me know, and have fun flying.